Hello and welcome to the Ruslan Belov channel. Today we have a huge number of changes along almost the entire line of contact. There are developments on the Orikhiv axis, the South Donetsk axis, the Pokrovsk axis, and the Kostyantynivka axis. We also have updates from Siversk, from the Kupiansk sector, and from the Sumy direction, which we will discuss and review in this video. But before we begin, as always, I sincerely ask you to subscribe to the channel. If you have watched these videos here before, but are still not subscribed, please consider doing so. Your subscription greatly supports the growth of this channel. Many thanks to everyone who has already subscribed. So it's already clear that next week will most likely see a meeting between Putin and Trump. This meeting will be significant, historic, without a doubt. It will be fascinating to watch, and of course, we will follow it closely together. Meanwhile, the fighting continues despite ongoing diplomatic talks, and we will keep analyzing the situation on the front lines. Over the past 24 hours, the Ukrainian armed forces have suffered a major setback. Their front collapsed in the Kostyantynivka area, particularly on the southern approaches to the city. To put it in perspective, Russian forces managed to advance there by 8.5 kilometers, an enormous gain for modern warfare. But we'll come back to that in detail later. I want to start with the situation in Zaporizhzhia region, where the Ukrainian position is also rapidly deteriorating. I'm talking about the area of Stepnohirsk and Plavny, where the Ukrainian forces have essentially ended up in a blockade. Look at the shape of the front here. Over the past 2 days, Russian troops advanced right up to the main road junction, putting the Ukrainian garrison in the nearby village of Plavny, to the west, on the verge of complete encirclement. As I explained in yesterday's report, the width of the remaining corridor has now shrunk to just 1.5 kilometers. In modern warfare, when the sky is swarming with FPV drones and artillery is ever present, 1.5 kilometers is practically nothing, a very narrow bottleneck. This means the Ukrainian troops in Plavny are already essentially blockaded. Even if they try to pull out, most of them will be cut down before they can escape. They know this, which is why yesterday they launched a counterattack to push Russian forces back toward the 3rd district and widen the corridor. What was the result? Nothing. Nothing but heavy losses. The counterattack failed to dislodge the Russians or widen the exit route. The Ukrainian troops in Plavny now appear doomed. I cannot give you the exact number of soldiers currently trapped. Operational figures are not yet confirmed, but it is at least in the hundreds. For now, they still have a narrow 1.5-kilometer route to try to break out, but the clock is ticking, not in days, but in hours. If they hesitate, the trap will snap shut completely. Russian troops, meanwhile, are preparing for storming actions, not only against Plavny, but also against an important Ukrainian defensive hub in this sector, Stepnohirsk. Taking Stepnohirsk is crucial because it opens the way along the M18 highway toward Hryhorivka. From there, the road runs through open terrain with no settlements to slow the advance. Hryhorivka is just 11 kilometers away. And beyond that lies Zaporizhzhia. This explains the fierce fighting here. The Ukrainian command understands they must do something to prevent Russian forces from reaching Hryhorivka, because that would place Zaporizhzhia within arm's reach. Now let's turn to the massive 8.5-kilometer breakthrough near Kostyantynivka. Take a look. See this dashed line? That was the line of contact just 24 hours ago. Russian troops were then positioned near Romanivka and Sukhaya Balka. This morning, on August 8th, they are in Katerinivka. That's an 8.3 kilometers advance. And this isn't just according to Russian maps. American mapping sources are showing even greater gains, depicting almost the entire Katerinivka area under Russian control. Local reports confirm this. Ukrainian troops remain only on the northern outskirts. The same applies to Sherbinivka. In the past day, Russian forces expelled Ukrainian troops from most of the settlement. Advancing 4 kilometers through urban areas, not across open fields, is an enormous achievement. Ukrainian forces still hold the northern edges, but the bulk of the settlement is now in Russian hands. What's next? After taking Katerinivka and Sherbinivka, the next step will be to seize Klibanbeg, which now seems much easier, and then push toward Kostyantynivka from the south, bypassing the reservoir. The only remaining Ukrainian defensive line here is formed by 3 villages to the southeast, Nelipivka, Plesheyevka, and Ivanopilia. But after the collapse of their other positions, it's doubtful these can hold for long. From a wider perspective, Kostyantynivka is already in a partial encirclement. The noose is tightening from all directions, and soon the Ukrainian command will have to choose: withdraw or be trapped under overwhelming fire. Why overwhelming? Because the surrounding areas are all high ground, while the city itself sits in a lowland. This puts Ukrainian forces at a major disadvantage, unlike in Chasiv Yar, where they held the heights. Here the roles are reversed, making a prolonged defense nearly impossible. Once the Kramatorsk road is cut, the city will fall even without prolonged urban battles. Moving on, there's also an interesting situation in Pokrovsk. Footage has emerged showing Russian troops on Likachiova and Malavicha streets. The mapped area is still limited to those streets for now, as the extent of control is unclear, but overall, Russian control over the city is expanding. Yesterday in my Telegram channel, I gave a forecast on when various cities might fall. Judging by current trends, Pokrovsk, Mirnohrad, and Rodinske will likely be under Russian control by mid-October. Mark my words, we'll compare notes when October comes. Elsewhere, in the Kupiansk sector, the Ukrainian position is also hanging by a thread. It all depends on how quickly Russian forces can cut the last supply route to the right bank part of the city from the south. Right now, they are just 5 kilometers away from it, well within drone strike range. Supplying the Ukrainian garrison in Kupiansk is already highly problematic. As for the Sumy region, there's nothing encouraging to report, no real progress. As I said, in my July summary, nothing significant should be expected from Sumy in August. The front there is essentially frozen. There may be small local gains, 200 or 300 meters into a tree line, but nothing more. For now, you can forget about this sector. It's unlikely to produce any major results. Maybe, by the end of August, Russian forces will finally take Yunakivka, and that's about it. By the way, Syrskyi has been talking about preparing bold new operations and offensives. Well, let them try. If they really commit fresh forces and resources to some new adventure, like they did with the Kursk operation, then by year's end, not only will Pokrovsk and Mirnohrad be under Russian control, but Druzhkivka as well, and the Russians will be at the gates of Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. Because if they keep throwing reserves into such offensives, the Donetsk front will collapse even faster than it already is. So when we previously saw daily advances of 7 or even 8 kilometers, with over 20 square kilometers being lost by the Ukrainian side each day, mostly in Donetsk region, the last 24 hours brought a similar picture. Specifically, in the Kostyantynivka area alone, Russian forces took 27.5 square kilometers under their control. If Ukraine starts committing reserves not to hold back Russian attacks, but to launch offensives of their own, I'm telling you, their front will collapse entirely, and we will start seeing breakthroughs of 10 or even 15 kilometers. Syrskyi said his piece. Well, we'll see how that turns out. Moving on to the Huliaipol sector. Here, the situation along the front line has once again intensified. Near the settlement of Vysok, Ukrainian positions came under fire from multiple launch rocket systems. There are also reports of renewed Russian pressure on Poltavka and Olhivska, where Ukrainian defenses were attacked. Earlier, Russian forces had struck Ukrainian positions near Malinivka, eventually capturing the settlement. Now their advance toward Poltavka and Olhivska is picking up again. Novivanivka has also come under shelling, and Russian aviation carried out an airstrike near Uspanivka. In terms of territorial changes, Russian forces are continuing to expand their control west of Novodarivka, advancing toward Novivanivka and securing up to 2 kilometers of gains. Areas marked in red on the map are now fully under Russian control. In Temirivka, where Russian units are entrenched, Ukrainian forces continue daily attacks using FPV drones. Today, Russian positions in the settlement were hit again, but official reports say Russian troops repelled 3 Ukrainian assault attempts. Meanwhile, Ukrainian positions are also under fire near Novonikolayevka and Novohrihorivka. Though the front line there remains unchanged, there are also reports of Russian advances from Shevchenko toward Kamyshevaka, with regular strikes on Ukrainian positions in that sector, but no confirmed frontline changes today. We also have updates from the Alexandriahrad area. Yesterday, it was reported that a Ukrainian armored vehicle with personnel was destroyed there. Today, footage emerged showing the destruction of a Ukrainian T-72 tank. This indicates that Ukrainian positions remain inside Alexandriahrad and that Russian troops have not yet secured the settlement. However, pro-Russian sources report that Russian forces are already close to the town, and storming operations could begin in the coming days. Though the active phase has not yet started this week, the areas marked in red on the map here correspond to the previous day's gains, when Russian forces advanced 3.5 kilometers. Moving further along the map, we come to Udakne, where major developments have been recorded. Russian troops approached the settlement from the south, clearing and securing all the territory marked in red, an advance of up to 2 kilometers. They have now begun the assault phase for Udakne itself. Previously, Russian forces cut its supply road, applying pressure from the eastern outskirts. Now, attacks are coming from almost 3 directions, which could result in Udakne falling under Russian control within a week. Russian control is also expanding west of previously captured areas, with gains of about 2 kilometers. At the same time, positional battles continue around Kotlin and on the approaches to Udakne. Moving on to Myrnohrad, a strike hit a Ukrainian temporary deployment site, destroying the building that housed personnel and, according to some reports, killing a significant number of Ukrainian troops. Fierce fighting continues near industrial facilities in the area. Although pro-Russian sources have repeatedly claimed full control over these facilities, there is still no confirmation, and such claims may be premature. In the Rodinska area, Russian forces are gradually advancing from the Sukestki sector, fighting for industrial buildings. The situation here remains tense. As for Chasiv Yar, today's reports indicate positional fighting near Mykolaievka and Russian advances north of the city. An area with gains of up to 3 kilometers has been cleared and brought under Russian control. On the Siversk axis, no major changes have been recorded. However, in the Serebryansky forest, there are some new developments. From its southern edge, footage shows Ukrainian armored vehicles being destroyed by FPV drones at a range of up to 2.5 kilometers from the front line. Near Siversk, attacks on Ukrainian positions in the northern part of the city have been reported, with Ukraine claiming to have repelled 3 assaults. South of the Serebryansky forest, a swampy area has been cleared and brought under Russian control. No vehicles can operate here, only infantry units. Ukrainian positions are mainly concentrated farther north in the forest itself, where Russian troops are currently conducting demoning operations. On the Krasny-Lyman axis, incoming reports say Russian forces are expanding control to the north and west of Kolodyarzy, flanking the settlement. At the same time, strikes are being carried out almost all along the contact line in this area. Both sides are actively using FPV drones. The frontline configuration here remains unchanged. That's all for today's frontline update.